I never imagined my own husband's family would announce my business as theirs at a public event I paid for. Yet there I stood at the town's Women in Enterprise luncheon, holding a small plate of lemon tarts, when the microphone squealed and my sister-in-law, Evelyn, leaned into it as if she had rehearsed for weeks. "We are so proud," she said, smiling broadly. "Our family business, Lavender and Birch Home Goods, is truly a labor of love. A legacy we built together." My jaw tightened. Our business. They built. I felt something crack inside me, quiet, precise, clean, almost like the snap of a small bone. The applause rose around me before I could gather myself. I could see my husband, Mark, sitting at the reserved family table they had arranged without mentioning it to me. He clapped politely, staring at the floor. He didn't correct them. Not a word. Evelyn waved at the audience with the smug ease of someone who had never scrubbed a floor in her life, yet she claimed the brand born from my kitchen table, my years of savings, my sleepless nights, and my stubborn vision. The event organizer smiled at her, impressed. I watched the organizer's eyes drift toward me only once, hesitant, confused, before Evelyn redirected attention to herself. I had known the family took advantage of me in small ways. Borrowed things. Claimed credit for ideas in casual conversation. But this was a public rewriting of reality. As I stood in the back of the hall, I felt the room tighten around me. People exchanged looks. A few whispered. And I heard one voice, too loud to ignore. "I thought Martha owned that business. That was my name. My life's work." My throat tightened, but I stayed still. I watched Evelyn shift, her smile faltering for a moment before she launched into a new lie. "Well, you know how families work. We all contribute. It's really a shared dream." Shared. She had never worked a single shift. The organizer approached her again. "Whose name is on the business license?" she asked quietly. But nothing is ever truly quiet when a room smells gossip. Evelyn hesitated. "It's complicated." And I realized then that they thought I would keep allowing this, as I always had. That I would remain polite, tolerant, gracious. That I would keep shrinking myself to make space for their egos. But that moment, Evelyn taking the microphone meant for me, burned something old and heavy out of my chest. I set down my untouched plate of lemon tarts. I walked toward the hallway doors. And as I reached for the handle, I heard the event MC announce, "We will proceed with the recognition award after verifying ownership documents with the bank representative, who has just arrived." I froze. The bank representative? They invited the bank? My pulse kicked. Because there was one thing the family had never bothered to check, perhaps because they assumed they already owned it. Every account. Every legal entity. Every trademark. Every property lease. All of it, every single thread, was in my name alone. And the bank knew it. I stepped back into the room, silent, steady, and ready for whatever truth was about to unfold. Who will speak first when the bank representative takes the stage? My name is Martha Ellington, and I am 67 years old. I say that with pride, not hesitation. Time has carved me into someone sharper and softer all at once. Someone who sees motives beneath smiles and truths beneath silence. I've lived long enough to understand how people show their character in the smallest moments, and I've learned to stop explaining myself to those committed to misunderstanding me. Lavender and Birch Home Goods began when I retired early from my career as a high school literature teacher. Retirement, for me, didn't mean idle days. It meant freedom. Freedom to create, to experiment, to build something with my own hands. I crafted candles, soaps, and small batch home fragrances from natural ingredients. What started as a hobby became a local favorite, and then a real business. I designed every label. I managed every vendor relationship. I ran every pop-up booth, rain or shine. And through it all, I thought my husband, Mark, was proud of me. We married when I was 40 and he was 42. He'd always been the quiet type, content to let his more assertive sisters dominate family conversations. I didn't mind at first. Their personalities filled the room. I believed it was harmless. But with time, patterns emerge. People show you whether they respect you. And Mark's family had never once introduced my business without inserting themselves. We're helping her grow it. We've been supporting it from the beginning. It's kind of a family effort. I used to smile and let it go. It seemed easier than correcting them. But silence creates consequences. Silence gives opportunists a blank page to write their version of the story. And that day at the luncheon, they wrote me right out of it. At 67, I'm too old to let people erase me. Too seasoned to let them profit off my work. Too aware to pretend it's innocent misunderstanding. As the bank representative walked toward the stage, I stood near the back, composed. I noticed a few women I knew, fellow vendors, long-time customers, looking at me with knitted brows. One mouthed, "Did you know about this?" I shook my head gently. Inside, though, something steadied. A calmness born from clarity. I knew what was true. I had the documents to prove it. I had every invoice, every email, every contract stored carefully in labeled folders. But more importantly, I had the will to defend what I built. The house lights dimmed slightly as the bank representative reached the podium. My breath caught, not from fear, but from anticipation. Because this was the moment where truth would stand, uninvited, uncompromised. And for once, I would not shrink. What will the bank representative reveal as the room holds its breath? When I first married into the Ellington family, I mistook their behavior for warmth. They insisted on Sunday dinners. They invited themselves to our house. They asked endless questions about our finances, our plans, our decisions. I thought it was cultural, maybe generational. I grew up in a quiet household, where privacy was respected and independence was encouraged. But the Ellingtons lived like a hive, loud, interconnected, and constantly buzzing. Over the years, I learned their hive had a queen, Evelyn. Evelyn, 3 years younger than Mark, had a way of presenting herself as everyone's caretaker, everyone's fixer. But when you paid attention, you saw that her care came with strings. She needed credit the way some people need oxygen. And she hated when anyone, not even her own brother's wife, had something she didn't. Mark rarely challenged her. He was raised to keep harmony at all costs. His parents, now gone, had reinforced the idea that family unity meant letting Evelyn have her way. It didn't matter if she bulldozed others in the process. When I started Lavender and Birch, the family's interest sharpened. At first, it was innocent enough. They'd stop by my craft table at markets, smile, offer unsolicited advice. But when the business took off, when local boutiques requested wholesale orders, and online sales grew, they resurfaced with renewed intensity. "We should all be part of this," Evelyn said once, arms folded. "It would be good for the family brand," said her husband. "You're successful because we've been supporting you emotionally," another sister chimed in. It was absurd, but Mark urged me not to confront them. "It's cultural," he'd say. "They mean well." Meaning well does not give anyone ownership. Over time, little things disappeared. My business receipts, a few vendor catalogs, even a small locked cash box that I later found in Evelyn's trunk. She insisted she had accidentally placed it there during a family gathering. I let it slide. I didn't want conflict. But the real shift happened when my shop lease came up for renewal. The landlord casually mentioned that my family partners had asked for details about transferring the lease. Family partners. They had introduced themselves that way. I confronted Mark that evening, trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. But he brushed it off as another misunderstanding. And maybe I could have kept tolerating it, if not for that luncheon. As the bank representative shuffled papers on stage, I saw the Ellington family huddled around their table, whispering urgently. Mark looked trapped, caught between blood and marriage. And I realized painfully that he didn't know which way loyalty should fall. What he didn't know is that the choice had already been made for him. Not by me, but by the truth that was seconds from being spoken. Will the bank representative name the registered owner out loud? The public humiliation was only the tip of what they had taken. A few weeks before the luncheon, strange things began happening with my business accounts. My vendor orders, for wax, glass jars, fragrance oils, were suddenly delayed. One supplier emailed me asking why I had two separate requests for my account login. I hadn't requested any. Then my credit card company called. Mrs. Ellington, we're confirming the attempt to add an authorized user to your business credit line. I froze. I didn't authorize anyone. The representative paused. The request came from someone identifying themselves as your business partner. I didn't have business partners. When I asked for the submitted paperwork, it listed Evelyn's name. The audacity made my skin prickle. I confronted Mark immediately. He ran his hands through his hair, sighing. I'll talk to her. She probably misunderstood something. Misunderstood. She had submitted paperwork to access my credit line. Then came the warehouse incident. Lavender and Birch had outgrown my garage, so I leased a small fulfillment space. My key code worked for years, until one morning it didn't. I typed it in again. Nothing. I called the landlord. He was confused. Your sister-in-law said you wanted the code updated, he said. Said you preferred she handle inventory from now on. My heart dropped. When the landlord reset the code, I walked into the warehouse and found inventory missing. Not all. Just enough. Enough to fill a trunk or two. Enough to look like shrinkage, if you weren't paying attention. I knew exactly where it had gone. So I checked the local weekend market, the one Evelyn loved bragging about. And there they were. My candles. My labels. My signature lavender sage blend. Sitting on a table Evelyn stood proudly behind, chatting with customers. She called them her family-crafted products. She didn't even bother peeling off my vendor code sticker. It was on the bottom of every jar. I approached her. She stiffened. Oh, these. We thought you wouldn't mind. It's all in the family. I told Mark. He stared at the floor. She shouldn't have done that. But he didn't confront her. The breaking point came when my accountant discovered that someone had attempted to register a new business entity, Lavender and Birch Collective, listing Evelyn as majority owner. My business name was being hijacked, piece by piece. That day, I cried in my car for an hour. Not because of the lost inventory, or the stolen credit, or the lies. But because betrayal from family hits differently. It corrodes things that should have been safe. Yet betrayal also clarifies. It shows you exactly where you stand. And standing in that luncheon, watching Evelyn soak in praise that belonged to me, I realized something with pristine clarity. They weren't going to stop. Unless I stopped them. What evidence does the bank representative have in their folder? The bank representative, a composed woman named Karen Wallace, adjusted her glasses as she opened a Navy folder. But before she even spoke at that luncheon, I remembered all the steps that had brought us here. After discovering the attempted credit line theft, I visited the bank in person. Karen was the senior officer who handled my business accounts. She had known me since I opened them. Her brow furrowed as she scrolled through my account history. Mrs. Ellington, multiple attempts have been made to request access, change account managers, and initiate new cards. All denied, because you were listed as sole owner. Sole owner, I repeated softly. She nodded. Your documentation is airtight. I handed her a folder of my own, my business license, the articles of formation, tax documents, every vendor contract, even dated notebooks with original concepts. I kept meticulous records, a habit from teaching. Karen flipped through them, her eyes widening slightly. This is thorough. Too thorough for anyone to challenge. I told her everything, about the warehouse, the market booth, the hostility disguised as family involvement. She listened without pity, just focus. I'd like to formally document this pattern, she said. If they attempt further fraud, it becomes a legal issue. The word fraud felt heavy, but true. Then she made a suggestion. You should speak with a business attorney. You deserve protection. So I did. The attorney, a brisk but kind woman named Gloria, reviewed my files. She tapped her pen. Thoughtful. They're not just overstepping, she said. They're attempting to establish a false narrative of shared ownership. If unchallenged, that can harm you legally. She helped me file the notice of fraudulent attempts, a protection order for my business accounts, a cease and desist letter to Evelyn, a trademark confirmation documents for my brand, a formal record of sole proprietorship affirmation. Every stone was turned over. Every loose thread documented. Gloria concluded with something that struck me deeply. People like your in-laws don't stop. They escalate. But you have evidence they can't rewrite. I didn't yet know how right she was. Because 1 week later, the luncheon invitation arrived, addressed to the Ellington family entrepreneurs. I attended quietly, not out of politeness but precision. I wanted witnesses when the truth finally surfaced. And now, standing in that room as the bank representative lifted her microphone, I saw Evelyn's smile falter for the first time. Karen cleared her throat. We were asked to confirm the ownership of Lavender and Birch Home Goods before the award is presented, she said. Per our records, accounts, and verified legal documentation. The audience leaned in. My pulse slowed. Evelyn gripped Mark's arm. There is only one registered owner. Karen paused. Mrs. Martha Ellington. The room exhaled collectively. Gasps swept the audience. And the Ellington family's faces drained of color. How will the family react when exposed in public? The room had transformed. People were no longer politely listening. They were watching, hungry for clarity. Evelyn shot to her feet. There must be a mistake. Karen remained calm. The documents are clear. That business is family-run, Evelyn argued, cheeks flushing. We've managed it together for years. I stepped forward then, for the first time since the event began. My heels clicked softly against the polished floor as if marking each second that she lied. Evelyn, I said, my voice level. You've never worked a day for my business. Gasps fluttered again. She turned to me, teeth clenched. You said. I said nothing of the sort, I replied. I have every email, every receipt, every inventory log. Want me to read them aloud? A murmur rippled across the hall. Mark stood slowly. Martha, maybe we shouldn't do this here. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized something painfully simple. He didn't want truth, he wanted comfort. No, Mark, I said. For once, we will do this exactly where they tried to take credit. Right here, in front of everyone. Karen stepped aside, signaling support. I turned back to Evelyn. You tried to add yourself to my accounts. You changed the warehouse code. You took my inventory and sold it under your name. You attempted to register a new business entity using my brand. She began shaking her head, but too many witnesses had seen too much. Her denial held no weight. I felt something settle inside me, not anger, but resolve. For months, I said, I documented everything. I consulted lawyers. I filed protection orders. I prepared for the day you'd overstep so publicly that the truth would have to surface. The audience was silent. Then I said the words I'd been holding. Today is that day. Evelyn staggered slightly, as if emotionally winded. Her husband glared at me. Her sisters whispered frantically. But I wasn't done. I lifted a folder, the same one Gloria had advised me to keep with me whenever I attended public events involving the business. I placed it on the podium. This, I said, is every legal document proving sole ownership. The event director looked relieved. She had suspected something was off but hadn't known how deep it went. The award presenter turned toward me. Mrs. Ellington, would you like to accept the recognition? Before I answered, I scanned the room. Customers who loved my products. Small business owners who respected hard work. Women who knew what it meant to be dismissed, overshadowed, or quietly stolen from. Yes, I said. I would. And that was the turning point, not the award itself, but the moment I chose to stop being accommodating. Because kindness without boundaries is self-erasure. And I was done erasing myself. What silent consequences will the family face now that the truth is public? The fallout didn't come through yelling or dramatic confrontations. It came through silence, icy, heavy, unavoidable silence. The kind of silence that spreads through a community when truth lands loudly. Within days, small business groups were whispering about what happened at the luncheon. Word traveled fast. Vendors who had unknowingly purchased products from Evelyn's booth reached out to apologize, mortified they had contributed to the deceit. Boutique owners who once entertained Evelyn's pushy attempts to involve herself in wholesale deals now refused to take her calls. A local newspaper columnist wrote a subtle piece about the importance of ethical entrepreneurship, and while she didn't name Evelyn, everyone knew. But the most significant consequence came financially. My lawyer sent a formal cease and desist demanding repayment for the stolen inventory. And because we had documented value, photos, and serial-labeled jars tied to the warehouse logs, Evelyn realized she'd walked into legally airtight terrain. She tried to negotiate. I refused. She tried to blame Mark. I refused to engage. She tried to gather allies in the family. None would stand with her now. Not after witnessing the public humiliation at the luncheon. Her husband, embarrassed, withdrew from several community boards where he once boasted about their family-run brand. And then something unexpected happened. Mark moved out. Not because I told him to, but because he couldn't handle the pressure of choosing sides. He left me a note that said, "I love you, but I can't live in conflict." Conflict. No. This was accountability. He moved in with his sister temporarily. But it was the worst place he could have gone. The truth followed him there like a shadow. Neighbors whispered. Family members distanced themselves. And Evelyn, stressed and spiraling, lashed out at him daily. He had chosen wrong, and life showed him. Meanwhile, my business boomed. Customers began buying more, simply because they admired what I had endured and how I had handled it, with evidence, not emotion. My attorney forwarded me a letter from Evelyn's lawyer weeks later. She agreed to repay the inventory losses and cease all claims to the business. No apology, of course. But silence is its own apology when pride is shattered. The community that once tolerated her antics now looked at her differently. People avoid those who cling to lies long after the truth is exposed. Her public persona cracked. Quietly, irrevocably. And Mark. He returned eventually, asking to talk. I told him we would, but only after the dust settled. The conversation would require a different kind of truth. What happens when Mark tries to reconcile, and when I confront him calmly, directly, and fully? Several months had passed when Mark finally came home, not to move in, but to speak. Really speak. Something we hadn't done in years. We sat at the kitchen table, the one where I had created my very first candle prototype. The room smelled of lavender, a quiet reminder of what I built alone. He looked older, shoulders slumped. I never meant for any of this to happen. I believed that. Mark wasn't malicious, just passive. Passive enough to let people trample boundaries. Passive enough to let his family rewrite my story because challenging them meant discomfort. I know you didn't mean harm, I said. But you allowed harm. He swallowed hard. You didn't defend me. Not once, I continued. Not when they changed my warehouse code. Not when they sold my products. Not when they submitted paperwork in your sister's name. He rubbed his eyes. I thought staying neutral was helping. I shook my head gently. Neutrality always benefits the aggressor. Silence settled between us. He finally whispered, "I'm so sorry. It wasn't loud. It wasn't performative. It was honest. But honesty alone could not repair everything. We can move forward, I said softly. But only with boundaries. He nodded. His relationship with his family changed permanently after that. He stopped attending their weekly gatherings. He stopped making excuses for their behavior. He even began therapy, a decision I quietly admired. As for me, I felt lighter. Not because revenge had been served, but because truth had. Ethical revenge is really just clarity delivered at the right moment. The business thrived. I expanded to a second warehouse. I hired 2 assistants. Customers wrote notes thanking me for standing up for small business owners everywhere. And privately, in the quiet of my evenings, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the peace of avoiding conflict, but the peace of reclaiming myself. One afternoon, I received an invitation, an award nomination from the Chamber of Commerce recognizing integrity in entrepreneurship. They cited the luncheon incident as an example of transparent leadership. The irony wasn't lost on me. I smiled as I set the letter on my counter. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. Because without that pressure, without the betrayal, the lies, the theft, I might never have learned how strong I truly was. What final wisdom will I share with the audience now that the dust has settled? When I look back now, I don't focus on the humiliation or the legal battles or the public unraveling of my in-laws' schemes. I remember the realization that changed everything. People don't steal from you because they need what you have. They steal because they believe you won't stop them. But you can. Calmly. Quietly. At the right time. With facts, not fury. I learned that boundaries aren't walls, they're doors you control. I learned that silence can be a form of surrender if it protects the wrong people. And I learned that your work, your creativity, your sweat, and your vision deserve protection as fiercely as any cherished relationship. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. Do not let anyone rewrite your narrative. Not family. Not friends. Not anyone who benefits from your dimming light. Shine so clearly that their lies dissolve on contact. And most importantly, document everything. Evidence is power. And truth, when held steady long enough, becomes its own form of justice. Today, my business is fully mine, not just on paper, but in identity, community, and confidence. The Ellington family stays far from its shadow. And Mark and I rebuilt something quieter, sturdier, and more honest. But I didn't get here by winning a dramatic showdown. I got here by choosing clarity over chaos, self-respect over comfort, and truth over tradition. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply speaks through a bank representative holding a folder you prepared long before anyone realized they should have feared your calm. And that is enough. If this story kept you watching, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and tell me your thoughts in the comments.